At a recent shareholders' meeting in Dublin, Michael O'Leary, the chief executive of Ryanair, slumped into a leather chair and issued a mea culpa. Under his watch, Europe's biggest low-cost airline had bungled its fall vacation schedule for pilots. Over 2,000 flights would have to be cancelled. To contain the crisis, Ryanair might cut a week of vacation from the airline's 4,200 pilots, many of whom aren't full-time employees but independent contractors. If they misbehaved by declining to help, he added, they would get no goodies in the future. It wasn't the first provocative comment from Mr. O'Leary, a pugnacious leader who transformed Europe's airline industry with an aggressive cost-cutting approach that extended to the workforce. But this time, he prompted an outcry within Ryanair's ranks. Days later, Mr. O'Leary was forced to announce an additional 18,000 flight cancellations, after some pilots balked about returning to the air. Employees have banded together to demand collective bargaining and more secure contracts, touching off a fresh clash with management. Last week, 59 pilots representing employees across Europe renewed those demands, adding that pilots have had enough. The tensions at Ryanair are flaring at a time when labour practices are being debated across Europe. As businesses look to squeeze costs, around a third of the European workforce is now in an alternative employment arrangement, rather than in full-time, regular employment. Such employees don't usually require the same level of benefits for healthcare, retirement and unemployment. The European Commission is pushing for tougher social protections for this increasingly flexible workforce. While the scrutiny has focused on gig economy companies like Uber, it is increasingly extending broadly to a contractor class that includes construction workers, accountants and even pilots. Ryanair controls its expenses by using a mix of full-time employees and self-employed pilots recruited through outside agencies. It also issues Irish work contracts to cabin crew and senior pilots around Europe, arguing that they work in Irish-registered aircraft and not in the countries where they are based. The approach helps Ryanair sidestep labour regulations and high social security taxes in many of the 33 countries where it operates, making its labour costs among the lowest in the European industry. Those costs run around €2 per employee per hour flown, less than half the costs of two rivals, EasyJet and Norwegian Air. European regulators have been investigating the employment agencies Ryanair used to recruit new pilots. In Germany and Britain, authorities are examining alleged tax evasion at the agencies. Ryanair's use of Irish labour contracts have faced legal challenges in several countries that have accused the carrier of failing to pay social security. The company's practices are also feeding employees' frustrations. In interviews, more than a dozen current and former pilots and crew members described demanding work conditions and atypical employment arrangements that made it difficult to voice complaints. Most agreed to speak on condition of anonymity, citing non-disclosure agreements in Ryanair contracts and concerns about jeopardizing their jobs.